when we launched Indie 1031 was the time that term indie or indie music was becoming mainstream.
Yeah.
Yet it was still not the mainstream.
Right.
Michael Steele, who used to program Kiss FM, he landed this job to program this Entravision signal called 103.1. But that's where like Groove Radio was. And if you're familiar with that signal 103.1, it doesn't have a great signal.
Right.
So you know Roy Laughlin. I know Roy Laughlin. Roy used to be an upper management guy at Clear Channel / iHeart. And he had an idea one day. And he sounds a little something like this for your listeners that don't know who Roy is. What if I called up Entravision and just offered them $2 million to do the sales for that radio station, but we handle the programming? And at the time, iHeart didn't have Alt 98.7. At that time, they were still Star 98.7. They weren't even an alternative radio station at the time. So iHeart didn't have a product that could compete with K-Rock. Roy always wanted to compete with K-Rock and reversely help Kiss FM.
Yeah.
Right? Just impact the market, all to benefit the almighty Kiss FM at iHeart.
Yeah.
In doing so, he hires Michael Steele to be the program director. Michael Steele goes to Amoeba and buys $10,000 worth of CDs, all indie rock stuff.
Yeah.
Like Arcade Fire. Who?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every Ramones title.
Right.
All this classic punk rock intertwined with indie music.
Yeah. Put
it all together, and you got Indie 103.1.
Yeah.
So Michael calls me up and he says, I just got this job. You know, let's put some thought into it over the holidays, because I was landing in Omaha at the time for the Christmas holidays and all that. And he says, TA, I got $10 an hour for on-air talent in market number 2. Might as well be market number 1, because LA is the number 1 billing market in the world.
Right.
He says, what the hell am I going to do? I mean, I'm going to put myself on the air, meaning himself, Mark Solville, who was his music director. And how am I going to hire a night guy at $10 an hour? And how am I going to keep Mark Solville here when I can only pay him $10 an hour? I just don't know what to do. And I said, without missing a beat, I said, let's call Steve Jones. He said, Steve Jones, like the most common name in America, right? Or in the world, probably, right? Steve Jones, the only Steve Jones I know is the guitar player from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
I know of is the guitar player from the Sex Pistols. I said, yes, that's Steve Jones. He goes, you know him? Because I thought maybe we can get Jonesy to come over and do a 1 4-hour shift. And being a Sex Pistol, he's just going to play a bunch of anarchy punk rock that we hadn't even heard of.
Yeah, like a specialty show.
Right? Exactly. So I said, well, Jonesy, I'm heavily involved. I'm consulting the station. And we want to get you involved. Can we come over and talk to you? He goes, sure. We go over there. He can't get off the couch. He's another meeting that I'm at where the star is horizontal. And I said, we want you to come over and just do like a 4-hour shift and just play a bunch of anarchy. He goes, like what? Like play whatever I want? Yes. Are you sure I could play whatever I want? Yes. Okay. He says, let me take this to a whole nother level. My British accent's not that great, so I'm not going to try. So he says, I've never had a real job in my entire life. How about if I come over and do a real job for you and be an on-air disc jockey for you guys?
That's awesome.
And we'll create a show, which later on the next day he said, we're going to call it Jonesy's Jukebox. And you guys are going to let me play whatever the F I want.
But Steve Jones, it was cool. He was cool enough to say, look, I haven't had a real job in my entire life. How do you feel about me doing this full time? And
we looked at each other and went, hell yeah, let us go work on it. So we left his house and we said, well, back to the original problem, how this meeting happened. I got $10 an hour to pay people. Well, we need to go sit down with Roy at iHeart and say, we got an opportunity to have a real legend on this radio station.
Yeah.
So no offense to Roy, but I have to tell this story. We set up the meeting with Roy Laughlin and Steve Jones and his manager, shout out Anita Camerata, and Michael Steele and myself. And we go into Roy's office, and the first thing Roy says is, Steve, nice to meet you. How's Sid Vicious doing? And we're like, oh my God, are we dead? For those of your audience that isn't aware, Sid Vicious had been dead for like 30 years.
Yeah.
When this meeting was taking place. And so Jonesy had to inform this guy that we were meeting with, Roy Laughlin, that Sid Vicious is dead. And so the meeting got started off very awkwardly, but there's only one guy on the planet that can say that and get away with it and pull it off and everything be just okay. And that's Roy Laughlin.
Right.
And so we started talking. And so we were able to put together a deal with Ford and get him in a truck and a couple of dollars, not a ton of money, but certainly more than $10 an hour. And we put the deal together. That was a really, 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 really fun time.
Why do you think Indie 1031 didn't last longer?
The advertising rates are based on ratings.
Right.
And when you have a signal that doesn't cover Los Angeles County, like maybe Kiss FM signal does, or Real FM signal does, where you can hear them all the way in San Bernardino, it's hard to get those ratings, therefore charge a rate that can ultimately, make sense.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the FCC saying, you can't be involved, iHeart. So Entervision's going to have to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And Entervision just got to the point where, well, this was fun while it lasted. Let's, get back into Hispanic broadcasting, which is what we know and love. And so consequently, Indie 1031 lasted about 3 years.
Right.
It was the funnest time I've ever had in my entire career.